She's destroying my life! They thought I'd break, but I've been preparing for this moment.
Miss Chloe, your accusations just now constitute defamation. And Mr. Blake, there's documented evidence of fraudulent activity under your name.
The shatter of a champagne flute on the marble floor, the chatter of 500 guests suddenly silenced. And then, the voice of my little sister, Chloe, tore through that silence, echoing across the ballroom of the charity gala I had spent 6 months of my own blood, sweat, and tears organizing. "She is ruining my life!" she screamed, tears welling in her eyes, her finger pointed directly at my face. In front of my most important clients, in front of my boss, in front of the entire world I had worked so hard to build, Chloe had snatched the microphone from the host and launched into the performance of a lifetime. She sobbed out a story of how I, her selfish and cruel older sister, had ruthlessly stolen the dream home her fiancé, Blake, had promised to give her after their wedding. The entire room turned to look at me, their gazes shifting from curiosity to contempt and judgment. But there was one truth none of them knew. It was my apartment. The penthouse overlooking the Hollywood Hills that I had worked 2 jobs, sacrificed vacations, skipped dating, and lived with ironclad discipline for 7 long years to afford. A slap to the face would have been less painful than this public, brutal humiliation. How did we, 2 sisters who once shared a bedroom, get to this point? How could the little sister I adored, an influencer with a picture-perfect Instagram life, be willing to torch my career out of pure greed? The answer is much darker and more complicated than you think. It isn't just about jealousy. It's about a blatant lie, a multi-million-dollar fraud, and a handsome fiancé with secrets buried deep behind a perfect smile. They thought that by cornering me in front of everyone, I would submit. They thought I would break down and hand over the fruits of my labor to save what little face I had left. But they made one fatal mistake. They didn't know that in the weeks leading up to that fateful gala, I had stopped being a silent victim. They didn't know I had been quietly investigating. And they certainly never expected that their very public lie at the gala would be the final piece of the puzzle, the irrefutable proof I needed to expose it all. Stay with me, because in this video, I'm not just going to tell you a story of betrayal. I'm going to show you, step by step, how I turned my most painful humiliation into my most powerful weapon. How I turned the tables and exposed a perfectly crafted conspiracy. This isn't a story about how I lost a sister. This is a story about how I found myself. And I promise you, the ending will leave you stunned. To understand the cruelty of Chloe's performance that night, you have to understand the parallel worlds we grew up in, right here in Los Angeles, the capital of dreams and delusions. On the surface, we were sisters. In reality, we were 2 lines that could never intersect. My path was paved with endless nights in the library at UCLA, where I pursued my degree in architecture. It was built over years of working at a prestigious design firm, starting at the bottom, taking the projects no one else wanted, and proving myself with blueprints instead of words. I lived in a tiny apartment in Van Nuys, cooking my own meals every night while my friends partied in Santa Monica. I said no to every frivolous luxury, funneling every single dollar I saved toward one goal: to one day own a space of my own, a sanctuary, a testament to my existence. And I finally did it. The penthouse in West Hollywood wasn't just real estate. It was the sweat, tears, and pride of 7 years of my youth. While I was busy building actual structures, Chloe was busy building a facade. Her path was paved with Instagram filters, glamorous brunches in Beverly Hills, and content creation trips to Bali or Paris that our parents paid for under the guise of investing in her passion. Her life was measured in likes and comments, a hollow world propped up by virtual praise. Whenever I'd voice my concerns, my parents would recite their familiar chorus: Chloe is sensitive, an artistic soul. You've always been the strong one, so try to support your sister. Family helps each other. And just like that, I became the strong sister, the one responsible for sacrificing and yielding to my sister's sensitivity. Everything began to spiral the day Chloe brought Blake home. He was everything Chloe had ever wanted: handsome with $1 million smile, dressed in perfectly tailored suits, talking about algorithms and world-changing crypto projects. He painted a brilliant future, a life where Chloe would never have to worry about money. At first, I was genuinely happy for her. I hoped Blake would be the one to give Chloe the stability and purpose she always lacked. But then, the requests began, subtle and dripping with poison. First, it was, Olivia, what are your plans this weekend? Blake and I need to borrow your apartment for a few hours to host a very important investor. My place just isn't professional enough. I bit my tongue and agreed, telling myself it was a small price to pay to help my sister. Then, could you introduce Blake to your boss? Just for a quick chat. He really admires your firm. I started feeling uneasy about mixing family and my career, but I gave in, not wanting to disappoint Chloe. And finally, the line was crossed entirely. Sis, Blake and I are in a bit of a tight spot. We just need a small float to close this funding round. It's only about $20,000. The investor's wire is coming through next week. We'll pay you back immediately, with interest. My heart sank. A voice inside me screamed that something was wrong. But when I looked into Chloe's hopeful eyes, when I heard her talk about her dream wedding and their glorious future, the strong, older sister in me took over. I transferred the money. I lied to myself that this was the last time, that I was investing in my sister's happiness. I had no idea I wasn't investing. I was paying for the first bricks of the prison they were building for my life. That $20,000, of course, never came back. Every time I asked, Chloe would offer a vague excuse. The investor is just finalizing the paperwork. There's a slight delay with the banking system. Blake says we'll have it next week for sure. The promises stretched on, while I was sinking into a growing sense of dread. Their silence about the debt wasn't as frightening as the way they began to act like it never existed. They continued their lavish lifestyle, posting photos from weekend trips to Napa Valley, while I was cutting back on my own expenses to cover the hole I had voluntarily dug for myself. The horrifying truth came out by complete accident. During a quiet family dinner, our parents organized to bond with their future in-laws. Everything was pleasant until Blake's mother, a classy woman, turned to me with a warm smile and said, Olivia, I truly admire Blake. So young and already buying such a wonderful place in West Hollywood as a wedding gift for Chloe. You're so lucky to have such a talented and thoughtful brother-in-law. The wine glass in my hand froze. All the sound in the room seemed to fade into a low hum in my ears. I glanced at Chloe and saw her face pale for a split second before she forced a strained smile. Blake, on the other hand, remained perfectly calm, shrugging modestly and saying, I just want the best for Chloe. An icy chill ran down my spine. This was no longer a little lie or a misunderstanding. This was an elaborate, orchestrated performance, and I, with my own home, was the unknowing centerpiece. Right after dinner, I pulled Chloe into the kitchen, my voice trembling with rage. Chloe, what was that? Why does Blake's mother think my apartment is his? Chloe avoided my eyes, nervously fiddling with her engagement ring. It's just a harmless white lie, sis. He needed to make a good impression on his parents. They're going to invest in his company. Once the money comes in, we'll buy an even bigger place. Just think of it as helping us out a little. A little, I nearly shouted. You used my house and my money to build a lie. This isn't a little, Chloe. The real confrontation happened the next day. Blake and Chloe came to my apartment, no longer asking, but demanding. Blake, his charming smile gone, said it plainly. Olivia, we need this apartment. This isn't a request anymore. Our future, my family's investment, it's all tied to this. You can't ruin this for us. For the first time in my life, the strength my family had assigned me wasn't a burden, but a weapon. I looked Blake dead in the eye and said clearly and firmly, the answer is no. This is my home, and your charade ends now. And that's when I realized I was utterly alone. That very evening, my parents summoned me to their house. They didn't ask questions. They didn't listen. They sentenced me. How could you be so cruel? My mother cried. She's already told his entire family. How do you expect her to live this down? Do you want her engagement to be called off, for her to be humiliated in front of everyone? My father, the man I had always respected, looked at me with deep disappointment. This is about your sister's entire future happiness, Olivia. What's an apartment compared to that? You're being selfish. You're tearing this family apart. But it's my apartment. I earned it. They're the ones lying to everyone. I tried to explain, desperate. I didn't raise you to be so petty and calculating with your own sister, my mother said, and her words were a knife to the heart. In that moment, I understood. In their eyes, I wasn't the daughter trying to protect what was hers. I was an obstacle in the way of their favored child's happiness. The people I loved most were the ones willing to push me off a cliff just to build a bridge for Chloe to walk across. I walked out of the house I grew up in, feeling colder and more alone than I had ever felt in my life. This was a war I would have to fight alone. The following days were cloaked in a heavy silence. I returned to my apartment, which once felt like a symbol of success and now felt like a lonely fortress. The four walls I had poured my soul into creating suddenly felt cold. I had my dream home, but I had lost my family. My parents' betrayal hurt more than Chloe and Blake's audacity. They hadn't just failed to protect me. They had actively participated in trying to tear down my self-worth. In my despair, I did what I should have done weeks ago. I called Jenna. Jenna has been my best friend since college, a razor-sharp lawyer working in San Francisco. She listened to me sob over the phone, never interrupting, just letting me pour out all the pain and resentment. When I was done, there wasn't a moment of silence for self-pity. Jenna's voice came through, crisp and clear. Olivia, listen to me. This crossed the line from family drama into something else a long time ago. Your parents are blinded by emotion and favoritism. As for Chloe and Blake, they're not just being unreasonable. They are exhibiting patterns of extortion and fraud. Extortion? Fraud? But they're my family, I weakly protested. That's what makes it more dangerous, Jenna cut in. They're exploiting your love and your sense of obligation. You've given them money, you've let them use your home, And now you're letting them destroy you mentally. It's time to stop playing the victim, Olivia. It's time to protect yourself. Find out who this Blake guy really is. Jenna's words were like a splash of ice water to the face. She was right. I had been so focused on the pain of betrayal that I had forgotten I had the right and the ability to fight back. The despair inside me began to give way to something else, a quiet, simmering rage that was starting to catch fire. That anger gave me strength. The next day, I began my own investigation. As an architect, my job requires meticulous attention to detail and connections with people in construction, real estate, and investment. I started with the basics. Blake's company. Its website was slick, full of buzzwords about blockchain and AI, but it had no physical address, no employee roster, and not a single tangible product. It was a beautiful shell. Next, I discreetly called a few real estate brokers and contractors I trusted, people who had been in the business for decades. I just asked casually if they'd ever heard of Blake or his company. What I heard back was a series of red flags. One contractor mentioned Blake had stiffed him on materials for a small renovation project 2 years ago. Another broker whispered about rumors of a gambling problem. The most damning discovery came from an old friend who works in cybersecurity. With just a few pieces of basic information, he uncovered a horrifying truth. Blake's breakthrough crypto project was a classic Ponzi scheme dressed up in new technology. He was taking money from new investors, like his own wealthy family, to pay fake returns to earlier ones and to fund his lavish lifestyle. Their plan was now clear as day. They needed my apartment not just as a wedding gift, but as collateral, as proof of fake success to lure in new victims. While I was untangling Blake's web of lies, a major event in my own career was approaching, the annual architecture industry charity gala. This year, my firm was the lead sponsor, and I was the head of the organizing committee. It was the culmination of years of hard work, my chance to solidify my reputation. But it came with an ironic obligation. I had to invite my family. And that meant Chloe and Blake would be there. A cold sense of dread crept over me. I knew they wouldn't let this opportunity pass. The stage was now set. The final battle wouldn't be in my living room or in a lawyer's office. It would be at my own night of triumph. And I knew I had to be ready for an unforgiving war. And now for the final act. The part where the curtain rises on the climax and the collapse, where all the schemes and truths are laid bare in the spotlight. The night of the gala was a perfect Los Angeles night. The sky was clear, and the city lights sparkled like a carpet of diamonds below the luxury hotel where the event was held. Everything was perfect, from the white orchid centerpieces to the smooth jazz trio. This was my night, the result of months of planning, the pinnacle of my career to that point. I smiled, greeted colleagues, shook hands with important clients, playing the part of the graceful, confident host. But inside, my chest was tight. Every time the grand doors opened, I flinched, searching for them. And then they arrived. My parents walked in, their faces tense and forced. Following right behind them were Chloe and Blake. Chloe was stunning in a scarlet dress, deliberately commanding attention, while Blake had his arm around her, smiling as if he owned the place. They moved like a power couple, completely ignoring my existence. They hadn't come to celebrate. They had come to deliver an ultimatum. The confrontation happened in a quiet corner near the terrace. Blake cornered me, his smile gone, replaced by a cold, naked aggression. "This is your last chance, Olivia." Either you sign over the apartment tomorrow morning, or I tell everyone here how terribly you've treated your own sister. That career you've worked so hard for. It's about to get very messy. The rage I had suppressed for so long finally erupted. I looked him dead in the eye. "There will be nothing," I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. "There will be no apartment, no silence. I know what you've been doing, Blake. I know about the debts, your shell company, and your entire fraudulent scheme." The color drained from Blake's face, but it was Chloe who lost control first. Seeing her plan about to crumble, her victim instincts kicked in. And that was the moment I told you about at the beginning of this video. She stormed onto the stage, grabbed the microphone, and began her performance. "Someone help me! My sister is ruining my life!" The room fell silent. The music stopped. Every eye was on us. I saw phones being raised, flashes going off. I saw the stunned look on my boss's face, the curiosity of our clients, and the triumphant glint in Chloe's eyes as she continued to spew her lies about how I had stolen her wedding gift. She cried. She collapsed. It was an Oscar-worthy performance of audacity. She expected me to break. She expected me to cry, to try and desperately defend myself. But I didn't. I just stood there, looked right at her, and took a deep breath. And then a calm, powerful voice cut through the crowd. "I think that's quite enough, Ms. Chloe." Mr. Alistair Croft, the lawyer I had invited as my guest of honor, stepped forward. He wasn't angry. He was composed, professional, and that composure was what made him truly terrifying. Mr. Croft stood beside me, facing a still stunned Chloe and Blake on the stage. "Ms. Chloe, the baseless accusations you have just made publicly in front of hundreds of witnesses constitute defamation. The prior threats your associate, Mr. Blake here, made against my client could be prosecuted as extortion." He then turned to Blake's parents, who were sitting in the front row, horrified. He held up a thick file he had been carrying. "And Mr. and Mrs. Blackwell, I believe you'll be very interested in this file. It details the startup your son has been funding with your money. It contains full documentation of fraudulent activities, gambling debts, and a list of other investors who have been defrauded." A collective gasp went through the room. Blake's mother's face was ashen. Chloe was stammering, speechless. As for Blake, his confident facade had completely melted away, leaving only the raw panic of a cornered criminal. Hotel security quickly arrived, politely but firmly escorting Chloe and Blake from the ballroom. Chloe was still screaming, but no one was listening anymore. The show was over. As they were led away, I saw my parents. They were frozen in place, their faces a mixture of shame, confusion, and for the first time, perhaps, regret. The war was over, not with a shouting match, but with the cold, hard truth, ruthlessly exposed under the bright lights of the stage. When the ballroom doors closed behind Chloe and Blake, a strange silence fell over the room. Hundreds of pairs of eyes were no longer looking at me with judgment, but with a mixture of shock, respect, and maybe a little awe. The drama was over, and the villain had been clearly identified. The first person to walk over to me wasn't my parents, but my boss, a respected architect I had always admired. He put a hand on my shoulder and said, his voice full of sincerity, "I'm proud of how you handled yourself tonight, Olivia. A solid structure doesn't just need a beautiful design. It needs an unshakable foundation. You showed everyone just how solid your foundation is. Don't you worry about a thing." His words meant more than 1,000 consolations. Chloe had tried to turn my greatest triumph into my greatest disaster, but she had failed. Instead, she had unintentionally given me a stage to prove my character to my entire professional world. Shortly after, I saw my parents approaching hesitantly. My mother was crying, but they were tears of shame. My father could only manage to say, "We're sorry, Olivia. We were wrong." I didn't answer, just gave a quiet nod. Tonight wasn't the time for forgiveness. It was a time for the truth to settle. The weeks and months that followed were a cascade of inevitable consequences. The Blackwell family, after reviewing the file Mr. Croft provided, not only broke off the engagement, but also became the primary witnesses in the case against Blake. With irrefutable evidence, Blake was prosecuted for fraud and embezzlement, eventually taking a plea deal that included restitution and a suspended prison sentence. His paper empire had crumbled to dust. Chloe returned to my parents' house, no longer a princess on the verge of marrying into wealth, but a failed 28-year-old who had lost both her fiancé and her dignity. Her virtual life on Instagram went silent. For perhaps the first time in her life, she had to face a reality with no filter. My relationship with my parents was rebuilt, slowly. They were truly remorseful. They went to family counseling. Their apologies were now backed by actions. But I had changed too. I love them, but I've learned to love myself more. During one session, I made it clear, I can forgive, but I won't forget. Our relationship from now on has to be built on respect, not one-sided sacrifice. I will never allow myself to be the sacrificial lamb for anyone's happiness again, not even my sister's. They accepted it. My life turned a new page as well. A few months after the gala, I met Daniel. He's also an architect, a quiet, kind man who admires me for my strength, not for my sacrifices. He loves my boundaries because he understands they are a part of me. Sometimes, in the evening, I stand on the balcony of my apartment, looking down at the lights of Los Angeles. This place, the epicenter of all the conflict, has now truly become my peaceful sanctuary. The storm taught me an invaluable lesson, one I want to share with all of you. As an architect, I know that a great structure needs a solid foundation. Life is the same. Your boundaries are the foundation for your relationships and your self-respect. They aren't walls to keep people out. They are intelligent designs to protect your safe space, your mental health, and your core values. You are the lead architect of your own life. You have the right and the responsibility to design a life where you are respected, safe, and true to yourself. Never hand over that blueprint to someone who doesn't deserve it. And never let anyone demolish the foundation you have worked so hard to build. My story was a painful journey, but it taught me how to rebuild my life on a stronger foundation. Have you ever had to be the architect of your own boundaries? How did you design them, and how do you protect them? Share your stories and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you or helped you feel stronger, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so we can explore more ways to build a solid and happy life together. Thank you for listening to my journey.